Hey everybody, Chris App reporting from FourPoint World Headquarters, i.e. my laundry room. Today, joining us is Matthew Chase. Matthew Chase is a student housing veteran. He's been in the industry for his entire career. The vast majority of his career, he has been in the management business. And I think Matthew is a great guest to have today because I think before we understand where this industry is going, we have to know what's going on at the property level. So Matthew, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. I apologize. I brought my quarantine beard with me today, but I'm glad to be here.
So Matt, let's go ahead and jump right in. So student housing was having just a gangbuster year. Things were going great. We were leasing at light speed. Properties were hitting all of their rent tiers. And then COVID-19 6 weeks ago just absolutely crashed our party. It did. It destroyed it, at least for the time being. So I guess from your perspective, you've been talking to a lot of managers, you know what's going on at the property level, the ground level. Talk to us about from that day in early March on to present day. What's that atmosphere? What's been going on? Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think the industry has been pleasantly surprised by the performance and resiliency of student housing since the onset of the pandemic in mid-March. I mean, 6 weeks ago, operators were in the midst of what was shaping up to be a very strong leasing season. Some operators were trending even 10% ahead of leasing at the same time a year ago. And so while leasing is still ongoing today, many operators are citing that their current velocity has dropped 25 to 50% since the onset of the pandemic. This means that leasing is still moving forward for fall 2020, despite the uncertainty of universities being business as usual come, fall semester. A reassuring data point that's kind of been uncovered now that we're into April was rent collections. And it's been actually really good news, overwhelmingly positive. The rent collections that came in for April were in the high 80s, touching on 90%. And that was only 5%, about 5 percentage points off of what would be considered normal. And some of that difference can actually be explained by operators either extending deadlines or constructing payment plans for, rental payments. And another encouraging note is that less than 5% of renters across the industry have asked for rent relief. And physical occupancy also remains relatively strong, somewhere in that 60 to 70% range.
The thought and idea is that a school needs to announce that they're coming back into session for the fall. And at that point, there's going to be a backlog in leasing that just is a huge rush. Talk to us about that. When do we know when student housing leasing will pick back up and we'll be back on track for a normal year?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're right. We already know that the leasing velocity has taken a hit, and that strong leasing season and nice lead relative to last year is all but gone. And the path forward will be a slow one. As of now, operators are sticking to their guns, so to speak. They've got their rent tiers, they've got their budgeted concessions for fall 2020, and that's what they're sticking with. But don't be surprised if this changes quickly and it becomes a race to the finish line. You're right. What everyone is waiting on right now is for a major Tier 1 university to announce their plans for the fall. And once they do that, all other universities will be quick to follow. It seems pretty binary in my opinion. If universities plan to hold classes, physical classes, in August, September, then I think it's going to be business as usual. If it's pushed back a semester or even a year, then I think we're going to be in a very tough spot for 2020, 2021. When will we know, right? That's the big question. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do imagine that in the next 2 to 6 weeks, you're going to start getting some indication of what's going to happen. Universities have a lot of moving parts. They have to start informing students. So my hope and my guess is that by the end of May, we'll have a better indication of what's going to happen.
Which, brings me to my last and final question. COVID-19 is rocking the world from every societal norm that we've ever known to business. Things have completely and totally changed. Our world is going to be no different from a management perspective, because that's what we're talking about today. Just from a standard student housing management, day-to-day operations standpoint, how do you see things changing, both from the short term all the way to the long term?
Yeah, another great question. What we do know is that the industry was already able to a lease online, and they, I think, were really good at that. But you're going to continue to see a heightened focus from operators to continue bolstering their online presence, as well as increasing their ability to operate properties virtually to the extent that that's possible. In the near term, we're seeing a lot of focus and discussion about lease language. Class and session clause is something that's come up, and then also others are talking about and revisiting force majeure clauses that are currently or not currently in their leases. Again, I don't see this being a long-term side effect, but rather something in the near term to help cope potentially with leasing for the upcoming school year. What I do expect to happen, for now and moving forward, is that all schools are going to adopt some sort of pandemic playbook. And I think universities are going to have a much higher sensitivity to density in the residence halls as well as across campus. And so I think you'll see universities potentially moving away from double ups and triple ups and maybe opting for more singles instead. And I think the same could also be said for off-campus housing. We may see renters start focusing on bed-bath parity, to avoid close contact with others. And I think, for new development, it'll be interesting to track unit mixes and amenities to see if there's any substantial shift from maybe a more community-focused perspective to a more individual or private one. And this just comes to mind given that the new normal may be that we don't shake hands as often. I do want to end on a reassuring note. Although the economy does appear to be heading downhill, student housing has built a reputation on being very resilient during recessions. We all know that when the job market is weak, more kids stay in school, more kids go back to school. So I think that's really positive news. And so even though the ongoing pandemic will certainly have an effect on this upcoming academic year, the long-term viability of student housing does remain strong.
Matthew, thank you very much for your time today. Everybody that's joined us on this vlog, we very much appreciate you being here as well. Coming up next week, Meredith McGrath will join us, and she will talk about the broader questions of schools and whether or not they are going to be announcing in the near term they're coming back for in-person classes for the fall. So be sure to tune in to that. Thank you very much for your time today. Hope you appreciated our blog, and we look forward to your comments.